How far can a joke go before it becomes betrayal? I thought it was funny, spontaneous, harmless, even clever. But when my husband saw what I called a prank, he didn't shout or cry. He just picked up his phone, called his lawyer, and ended our marriage with the calmest voice I've ever heard. I'm Mara Linton, 32, and I've always said marriage should be fun. I hated the idea of becoming one of those dull couples who stop laughing, who stop taking risks. Ethan used to love that about me, my impulsive streak, my sense of humor. He said I made his world brighter, but somewhere along the way, I started confusing laughter with love. It started small, teasing him at dinner parties, joking that he was too serious, that I was the wild one who kept us excited. People would laugh, and he'd smile politely, the kind of smile that hides a bruise. I told myself it didn't hurt him. After all, we had an easy life, a cozy house, good jobs, no big problems. So, when my ex, Caleb, reappeared at an art exhibit a week before our anniversary, I didn't see danger. I saw entertainment. Caleb was still the same, loud, charming, impossible to ignore. He said I hadn't changed, that I still had that spark. I laughed, flattered in the way you are when someone from your past remembers you as a story worth retelling. We talked, nothing serious, and when I mentioned Ethan, Caleb grinned and said, "Still with the guy who never laughs?" I told him Ethan laughed plenty, just not the way other people did. Caleb smirked and said, "Maybe he needs a reminder." That stuck with me. I told myself it was harmless, just a joke, that bringing Caleb to our anniversary dinner would prove I wasn't boring. I imagined everyone laughing, Ethan rolling his eyes, but secretly impressed by my confidence. I didn't plan for it to go wrong. I didn't plan for that kiss to mean anything. I called it a prank. One impulsive moment to make people laugh. But the moment Ethan saw me kiss my ex on the night meant to celebrate us, the laughter died. He didn't yell, didn't demand answers. He just looked at me, the way someone looks at a painting they once loved but no longer recognizes, and said nothing. The next morning, he called his lawyer. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The week before our anniversary, I met Caleb at an art exhibit downtown. It was one of those crowded, pretentious events where people pretend to understand abstract pieces while sipping cheap wine. I hadn't seen him in years, but when he smiled at me across the room, that same crooked grin from when we dated in college, it felt like no time had passed. He hugged me too long, said I looked dangerously happy, and I laughed like it was harmless. We talked for an hour, about old friends, old jokes, the things that used to make us feel alive. When I mentioned Ethan, Caleb raised an eyebrow. "The serious one," he said. I told him Ethan wasn't serious, just thoughtful. Caleb chuckled. "That's one word for boring." I laughed because it was easier than defending my husband. He always made me feel like the fun one, and I liked that version of myself. Loud, clever, irresistible. Before we left, Caleb said we should catch up again sometime. I said maybe. It wasn't a promise, but it felt like one. When I got home that night, Ethan was at his desk, working like always. He looked up and smiled. "You're late," he said. I told him I'd been at the exhibit, and he asked who I'd gone with. I said, "Just some friends. You wouldn't have liked it. Too loud, too many people pretending to understand art." He laughed softly, but there was something questioning in his eyes. I ignored it. The next morning, I told my best friend Tess about running into Caleb. She grinned. "That's hilarious. Does Ethan know?" I shook my head. "No, he'd probably get weird about it." Tess leaned forward. "You should invite him to your anniversary dinner. Can you imagine Ethan's face?" I laughed, though the idea stuck in my head longer than it should have. That night, Ethan and I had dinner at home. We talked about work, nothing serious, until I casually mentioned Caleb. "He's back in town," I said. Ethan paused. Oh, did you talk to him? I nodded, trying to sound casual. Yeah, just for a bit. It was funny, actually. He said you're still the serious one. Ethan smiled faintly. He's not wrong. I rolled my eyes. You make it sound like being serious is a good thing. He said, sometimes it is. It should have ended there. But later, while I was scrolling through my phone, Caleb texted, still as charming as ever. We should catch up properly. Maybe on your big day. I laughed and typed back, you wouldn't dare. He replied, try me. I showed Tess the message the next day. She said, you should totally let him come. It would be funny, like a full circle moment. I hesitated, saying, Ethan would hate it. Tess shrugged. You always worry too much about what he thinks. It's a joke. You're allowed to have fun. That word, joke, made it sound so harmless. So, when I sent Caleb the name of the restaurant, I told myself it was nothing serious. Just a silly surprise, a story to tell later. Ethan had no idea. He spent the week quietly planning our anniversary dinner. Reservations, flowers, the thoughtful gestures he always did without expecting praise. When I came home to find him wrapping a small box, he looked up shyly and said, You're going to love it. I smiled, feeling that small sting of guilt that comes when you've already decided to lie. On the night of the dinner, I wore the red dress Ethan liked. The one he said made me look like firelight. As we drove to the restaurant, he reached for my hand, and for a brief second, I thought about telling him, but then I imagined his reaction, the awkwardness, the lecture, the seriousness, and I kept quiet. The restaurant was crowded, warm, with golden light and soft music. We ordered wine, and Ethan told me how lucky he felt to have me. You make everything brighter, he said. I smiled, pretending the words didn't ache. Halfway through dinner, I saw Caleb walk in. My stomach flipped, but I smiled anyway, waving him over like it was planned. Ethan turned slowly, confusion flickering across his face. You invited him? He asked. I laughed. It's just Caleb. Don't be weird. Caleb grinned, pulling up a chair beside me like it was the most natural thing in the world. The conversation started light. Jokes about old times, Caleb teasing me about our wild college years. I played along, trying to make Ethan laugh, but his expression barely changed. He watched quietly, that polite, distant smile I'd started to mistake for boredom. At one point, Caleb raised his glass and said, Tamara, the only woman who could ever keep me guessing. Everyone nearby turned to look. I laughed too loudly, trying to control the moment. Ethan set his fork down, his hand resting on the table. Is this supposed to be funny? He asked quietly. It's a joke, I said, forcing another laugh. Lighten up. Caleb smirked and said, She always did love a little chaos. I shot him a warning glance, but he just grinned wider. The tension in the air grew sharp. Ethan didn't say another word for the rest of the meal. I told myself he'd cool off. He always did. But as we left the restaurant, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not hurt, just finality. That night, I lay in bed, rehearsing explanations for the next morning. How I'd say it wasn't serious, that it was all just a prank. I convinced myself he'd believe me. After all, he always did. What I didn't know then was that by sunrise, he'd already made his decision, one I'd never be able to laugh away. The next morning, I woke up alone. Ethan's side of the bed was cold, the sheets neatly folded back as if he'd left hours ago. I checked my phone. No message, no missed calls. I tried to tell myself he'd gone for an early run or to pick up breakfast, but the pit in my stomach said otherwise. I walked into the kitchen and froze. The flowers from the night before, a bouquet of lilies he'd given me at dinner, were in the trash. The card that came with them, still folded, sat on the counter. I opened it. His handwriting was steady, careful. You say everything is a joke, Mara. I'm tired of being the punchline. I stood there for a long time, staring at the note. It didn't feel real. He'd been quiet last night, sure, but this... Calling Caleb over had been a mistake, yes, but it wasn't betrayal. It was a prank, something to lighten the mood. Everyone laughed, well, except him. I texted him, "Can we talk, please?" No reply. I called, straight to voicemail. By noon, Tess came over, her tone more curious than concerned. "So, how bad was it?" she asked, dropping her purse on the counter. I told her Ethan had left. She whistled softly. "Wow, guess he really doesn't like jokes." I glared at her. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. I just wanted to tease him a little." Tess shrugged. "You kissed your ex, Mara, in front of him, on your anniversary." I groaned, rubbing my temples. "It wasn't like that. It was a peck, barely anything. I was trying to make things less awkward." She gave me a look. "And you think that helped?" I sat down, feeling the first wave of panic. "He'll cool off. He always does." Tess didn't look convinced. "Maybe. But if he doesn't, maybe it's because he's finally tired of being embarrassed." That word, embarrassed, stuck in my head. I hated how it sounded, like I'd done something cheap. But when I thought about the look on his face last night, I realized that's exactly what it had been. I spent the afternoon calling him again. Still nothing. Around 5, I called his mother, Grace. She answered on the second ring, her voice calm and distant. "Mara." "Have you talked to Ethan?" I asked quickly. "Yes." "Is he okay?" She paused before saying, "He's with me." Relief flooded me for a second. At least he was safe, until she added, "He doesn't want to see you right now." I started to explain, tripping over my words. "It wasn't serious. It was just a joke, a stupid prank. I didn't mean to." Grace cut me off. "You humiliated him. Do you know how that feels for someone like Ethan?" "I didn't humiliate him. Everyone knew it was harmless." "Did he know that?" she asked, her voice sharp now. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "He said you kissed another man to make a point, to make him look small." "Tell me, what point was that?" "It was supposed to be funny," I whispered. Grace sighed. "Mara, when you laugh at someone you love, you teach them to stop showing up." Then she hung up. I sat there, phone still in my hand, feeling the weight of every word. Later that night, I poured myself a drink and stared at the blank television screen. The silence was unbearable. I kept replaying the moment in my head. Caleb's smirk, the way I leaned in without thinking, the soft gasp from someone at the table. I'd thought a quick kiss would break the tension. Instead, it broke something else. When Tess called that evening, she tried to lighten the mood. "You just need to apologize in person. He's being dramatic." "Grace said he doesn't want to see me," I said. Tess hesitated. "Then write him something. He'll have to read it." I almost did. I opened my laptop, typed. It was only a joke, stared at it, and closed the computer. The words looked wrong, too small for the mess I'd made. The next morning, I drove to Grace's house anyway. She opened the door, surprise flickering across her face before settling into disapproval. "He's at work," she said. "He doesn't want visitors." "Please, Grace, I just want to talk." She sighed, stepping aside reluctantly. "You can wait in the living room, but I don't promise he'll come back here." I sat on the couch, looking around at the framed photos, Ethan as a child, his graduation, the two of us at our wedding. Grace stood by the doorway, arms crossed. "You know," she said quietly, "I never thought you were cruel. I just thought you liked being seen." "I do like being seen," I admitted, "but not like this." She gave a small, sad smile. "He gave you all his trust, and you treated it like a stage. Now the curtain's closed." I didn't reply. After an hour, Grace came back with a sealed envelope. "He asked me to give you this," she said. I tore it open. Inside was a single sentence written in his careful handwriting. "I'm meeting with a lawyer today." I looked up, my throat dry. "He's serious?" Grace nodded. "Ethan doesn't threaten. He decides." I left her house feeling hollow. The sunlight was too bright, the air too clean for how heavy I felt. I sat in my car, reading the note again, trying to make it mean something else. A bluff, an empty warning. But deep down, I knew. That night, I called Caleb. When he picked up, his tone was casual, amused. "So, how's the fallout?" "You think this is funny?" I snapped. He chuckled. "You're the one who kissed me. I didn't force you." I hung up. The apartment felt colder than ever. I poured another drink, staring at the empty space where Ethan used to sit. He hadn't yelled, hadn't slammed doors, hadn't even asked why. He just left quietly, the kind of silence that feels heavier than shouting. It hit me then. I'd mistaken his calm for weakness, but maybe this was what strength really looked like. Walking away without needing to explain. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the apartment made me jump. The hum of the fridge, the soft buzz of my phone that never showed his name. By morning, my nerves felt scraped raw. I showered, dressed, and went through the motions of getting ready for work even though it was Saturday. I just needed to move, to do anything that wasn't sitting alone with what I'd done. Around 9, I texted Ethan again. "Can we please meet? I'll explain everything." No reply. I waited another hour before sending, "I love you. I'm sorry." Still nothing. That silence was worse than anger. Anger had energy, direction. This was like being erased. At noon, Tess stopped by unannounced. She carried 2 coffees, the way she always did when she knew I was spiraling. "You look terrible," she said. I glared at her weakly. "Thanks for the support." She sat down, studying me. "Okay, so what's the plan?" "What plan?" "To fix this." I laughed. Short, sharp, hopeless. "He's talking to a lawyer, Tess." She frowned. "Maybe he's bluffing. You know how quiet types are. They threaten once to scare you." "He doesn't threaten," I said quietly. "He acts." She sighed, then tried to sound encouraging. "Then go see him. Don't text. Don't call. Just show up and talk to him face to face." That idea sat in my chest for an hour before I finally got into the car. His mother's street was lined with neat houses, the kind of calm that made my anxiety worse. When I parked, I saw Ethan's car in the driveway. My pulse jumped. I was rehearsing what to say when the front door opened. Grace again. She stepped outside before I could ring the bell. "He's home," I said quickly. "Please, I just want to talk." She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut clean. "Mara, you don't understand what you've done. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the way you looked at him afterward, like it meant nothing. Do you know how small that makes someone feel?" "I said it was a joke," I protested. "Then maybe that's the problem," she said. "You think everything can be laughed away." I stared at her, at the same kind of calm Ethan had when he'd walked out. That calm terrified me more than yelling ever could. She sighed, softening a little. "He's in the backyard. But if you go to him, say what you mean. Don't make excuses." I nodded and walked around the side of the house, my legs trembling. Ethan was sitting on the patio, coffee in hand, staring at the small garden he'd helped his mother plant last spring. He didn't turn when he heard me. "Ethan," I said quietly. He glanced back once, then looked forward again. "I asked my mother not to let you in." "I just want to explain." He sighed. "There's nothing to explain. I saw it happen." "It wasn't real," I said quickly. "It was stupid, impulsive. I didn't mean anything by it." He turned then, his eyes tired but steady. "You kissed another man on our anniversary. I don't care if it was 1 second or 10. You made me look like a fool in front of everyone. You didn't care how it made me feel. You just wanted to see how far you could push it." I felt heat rise in my face. "That's not true. I was just trying to be funny." He stood, shaking his head. "You weren't trying to be funny. You were trying to prove something. That you still had power over people. You've been doing it for years, Mara." The words hit harder than I expected. "You make it sound like I hurt you on purpose," I said weakly. He looked at me for a long moment. Maybe not on purpose, but definitely without care. I wanted to cry, but his calm made tears feel useless. "So that's it? I asked. "You're just done?" He nodded once. "I've already spoken to the lawyer. I'll handle the paperwork." I took a step closer. "You can't just throw everything away over one mistake." He met my eyes, unflinching. "You threw it away when you decided to humiliate me." I reached out, desperate, but he stepped back. "Please," I said, "I can fix this." "You can't fix what you won't take seriously," he said. Then he turned and walked into the house, leaving me alone with the sound of wind moving through the garden. I stood there for a long time before Grace came back out. She didn't say a word, just handed me a tissue. I wiped my eyes and whispered, "He's really leaving me." She nodded gently. "He already left, Mara. You just haven't caught up yet." Driving home, I replayed the conversation again and again, searching for any sign of softness in his voice, any hint that he might forgive me. But there was nothing, just calm finality. That night, I tried calling him again. Straight to voicemail. I left a message this time, my voice shaking. "I love you. I didn't mean to hurt you. Please don't do this." When I woke the next morning, there was a reply. Not from him, but from his lawyer. An automated email confirming our initial separation discussion scheduled for the following week. My name was listed beside his as respondent. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. The word felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else's life. Respondent, the one who answers for what she's done. I shut the laptop and sank onto the floor, realizing he'd chosen the one form of punishment I couldn't talk my way out of. Silence wrapped in paperwork, calm wrapped in consequence. It wasn't anger that ended us, it was dignity, and that, I was starting to learn, was something I could never laugh off. The following week felt unreal. The world kept moving. Buses roared by, kids laughed outside, the sky changed colors. But I stayed frozen in the same loop of disbelief. I kept waiting for Ethan to message, to say it had gone too far, to tell me he just needed time. But the silence only stretched wider. Every morning I checked my phone. Every night I put it face down on the table, pretending not to care. By Wednesday, I got an official email confirming our mediation meeting. Seeing my name beside his under petitioner versus respondent made my stomach twist. Tess came over that evening with wine, saying we needed girl therapy. I wanted comfort. Instead, I got more reality. "You need to be ready," she said. "He's serious. He's not playing some guilt game." I laughed bitterly. "He can't divorce me over a kiss." She tilted her head. "You kissed your ex on your anniversary, while people filmed it. He can do whatever he wants." Her bluntness stung. I didn't mean to hurt him. Everyone laughs at jokes like that. "Not everyone," she said softly, "and definitely not your husband." That night, I watched the video again. Someone had reposted it on social media. My own voice filled the room. Me laughing, Caleb leaning in, the awkward chuckles from the table. I watched Ethan's face in the background. The moment his expression shifted, the second his eyes went distant. I'd thought he was just embarrassed. Now I saw what I'd missed. Something breaking quietly. By Friday, the meeting arrived. I wore my neatest blazer, hoping professionalism might somehow hide the guilt. When I walked into the law office, Ethan was already there, sitting perfectly straight across the table. He didn't look at me right away. His lawyer greeted mine, their voices low and polite. Everything felt so formal, so cold. Ethan finally looked up. "You ready?" he asked quietly. His tone wasn't cruel. It was measured, the kind of calm that left no room for emotion. "I don't understand why it has to come to this," I said. He folded his hands. "Because I can't spend my life with someone who thinks disrespect is entertainment." I tried to defend myself. "It wasn't disrespect, it was a joke," he finished. "I know. You've said that enough times. But jokes have meaning, Mara, especially when you're the only one laughing." I swallowed hard, feeling the sting in my throat. "So what? You just give up?" "I'm not giving up," he said. "I'm protecting myself." The lawyers began discussing assets, accounts, joint property. Their voices droned on as my heart pounded in my ears. I signed papers I didn't read, nodded at words I didn't process. When they mentioned separate residence, Ethan said he'd already moved most of his things to his mother's house. That hit harder than anything else. He'd already started building his life without me. At one point, his lawyer slid a folder across the table, photos from the restaurant. Someone had taken them and sent them anonymously. In one, Caleb's hand rested casually on my arm as I leaned toward him. In another, Ethan sat watching, his posture tense but composed. I couldn't look at them for long. "You collected evidence?" I asked, trying to sound offended. Ethan's voice was steady. "I didn't collect it. It found me." The meeting ended in silence. When the lawyers shook hands, Ethan stood and gathered his documents. I said his name once, softly. He paused but didn't turn. "You're really walking away from this?" I asked. He said, "I'm walking away from being someone's joke." Then he left the room. I sat there long after everyone had gone, staring at the empty chair he'd left behind. My lawyer touched my arm gently. "You should go home," she said. I nodded, but I didn't move. Home didn't sound like a place anymore. It sounded like a memory. That night, Grace came by to collect the last of his things. She was polite, efficient. "He asked me to get the rest of his books," she said. As she packed, I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry. "Grace," I whispered, "do you think he'll forgive me someday?" She didn't stop folding his clothes. "Forgiveness isn't the same as returning," she said. When she was done, she turned to me and added quietly, "You used to fill every room with noise. He loved that once. But you never noticed that every time you laughed at him, he laughed a little less." Then she left, closing the door softly behind her. I sat on the floor for a long time, surrounded by the smell of him, soap, paper, faint traces of coffee. Everything he touched looked ordinary, but it carried weight now. The house didn't echo with laughter anymore. It pulsed with something heavier, quieter. Consequence. Around midnight, I opened the last envelope from the law office. There was a note attached in his handwriting, clipped neatly to the final draft of the separation agreement. It read, "A prank only works if both people laugh." The words blurred as I read them over and over. I used to think silence meant defeat. Now I realized it was mercy. He hadn't shouted, hadn't humiliated me in return. He'd simply handed me the truth, clean and quiet, and left me to live inside it. The days after the meeting passed like fog. I went through them, but nothing really touched me. The apartment felt like a museum of bad timing. Every object had meaning now. His forgotten coffee mug, the indentation in the pillow he used, the faint trace of his cologne that refused to fade. I'd wanted space so many times before, claiming I needed room to breathe, but now that I had it, it felt like suffocation. People around me started choosing sides. Tess called once, trying to sound upbeat. "So, what's the plan now? You're not just going to let him go, are you?" I told her there was no plan, that he'd made up his mind. She sighed. "You always let things get too serious. Maybe if you made him laugh again." I cut her off. "I don't think he finds me funny anymore." She didn't know what to say after that. Neither did I. At work, my co-workers whispered. The restaurant video had circulated online again, now with captions like, "When your prank ends your marriage." I stopped eating in the break room. Even the sound of laughter nearby made my chest tighten. Ryan, my department head, called me into his office one afternoon. "You've been distracted," he said gently. "Maybe take a few personal days." It wasn't a suggestion. So I stayed home, surrounded by silence. I thought about calling Ethan just to hear his voice, even if it meant hearing him say no again. But every message I drafted sounded desperate or manipulative. I deleted them all. On Thursday, Grace came by one last time to pick up a few remaining things. She was kind enough to knock softly before entering. He's moving into his new place this weekend, she said. He asked me to thank you for signing the papers. I nodded, my voice thin. Does he hate me? Grace hesitated. No, he's past hate. You can't hate what you've stopped holding on to. She looked around the apartment, her gaze landing on a photo still hanging on the wall. Our wedding picture. I'd forgotten to take it down. Grace reached out and straightened the frame, her fingers lingering on the glass. He said once that you made every room feel alive. I hope someday you understand what a gift that was. Then she left. That night, I sat at the table with a glass of wine and scrolled through my social media feed. There were still photos of us, vacations, birthdays, moments that used to look ordinary, but now felt sacred. I hovered over the delete button, then stopped. Erasing them wouldn't make me innocent again. They were proof that once we'd been real. Around midnight, I checked my email. There was a new message from the law office. The subject line read, "Final confirmation of dissolution. It was over, legally, emotionally, completely." Attached was a scanned note, written in Ethan's steady handwriting. "You used to say laughter keeps people close. I just wish you'd learned when to stop." I sat there, reading it again and again. He hadn't left an insult, or bitterness, or anger, just truth, simple and clean. I thought about the way I used to mock him for being quiet, for thinking too much before speaking. Now I understood. Words mattered to him because he didn't waste them. When the clock hit 2 a.m, I walked into the bedroom and turned off the light. The silence pressed in around me, heavy but honest. No laughter, no performance, no audience. Just the echo of my own voice in memory, saying things I couldn't take back, laughing in moments that never should have been funny. I whispered into the darkness. It was supposed to be a joke. The words sounded small, almost childish. For the first time, I understood why he'd stopped laughing. Because jokes, when they come from carelessness, aren't funny at all. They're just noise. And now the noise was gone. A month later, the silence stopped feeling temporary. It became the air I breathed, steady, cold, and constant. The apartment stayed clean because there was nothing left to mess up. No shoes by the door, no half-open laptop on the table, no quiet hum of him thinking while I filled the room with chatter. Sometimes I caught myself talking out loud, just to make sure my voice still existed. The first weekend without him, I drove past his new street. I didn't mean to. My hands just turned the wheel on their own. I saw him for a moment, unloading boxes from his car. He looked calm, lighter, like someone who'd stopped carrying something heavy. He didn't see me. I didn't get out. I just watched from a distance until my chest hurt too much to stay. That night, I dreamed of the restaurant again. The candles, the music, the sound of my own laughter echoing too loudly. In the dream, I reached for him across the table, but he wasn't there, just an empty chair and my voice bouncing back at me, over and over. I woke up with the taste of regret like iron on my tongue. People stopped asking about him. Even Tess, who'd once called every day, started fading from the edges of my life. I could tell she felt guilty, though she'd never admit it. She texted once, "You'll find someone who gets your humor." I didn't reply. I didn't want someone who laughed at everything I said. I wanted someone who'd still believe I could mean something when I wasn't trying to be funny. Work felt mechanical. No one made jokes around me anymore. Conversations paused when I walked in, resumed when I left. I understood why. I'd become a lesson, not a person. A reminder that laughter, once weaponized, turns sharp. One evening, I came home to find an envelope wedged under my door. Inside was the final notice. Property division completed. Joint accounts closed. No note this time. No handwriting, no warmth. Just the official end. I sat on the floor, the paper trembling in my hands. This was what peace looked like on paper. Neat, silent, impersonal. Later, I walked through the apartment, touching everything he'd once touched. the edge of the sink, the back of a chair, the light switch near the door. It was a strange kind of grief, mourning someone still alive. I whispered things I should have said when they still mattered. "I'm sorry. You were right. I didn't know how to stop performing." The walls didn't answer. For weeks, I'd told myself he'd come back when he calmed down. But now I saw it clearly. He wasn't angry. He was free. He'd taken the only thing I never gave him while we were together: quiet. I poured myself a drink, sat by the window, and watched the city lights blur into streaks. Somewhere out there, he was probably reading, working, sleeping peacefully. I wondered if he still thought of me. Not the woman from the video, not the punchline, but the one he'd first met, the one he thought would never hurt him for a laugh. I finished my drink, the glass trembling in my hand. There was nothing left to defend, no story to twist into humor. Just the truth, that I'd built my entire identity on being the fun one, the unpredictable one, and I'd finally run out of people willing to laugh. I walked over to the table where the lilies used to sit, the ones I'd thrown away the morning after it happened. I touched the spot where the vase had stood and whispered, "You were right to leave." Outside, a car passed, headlights sweeping briefly across the wall. For a second, I saw my reflection in the window. Pale, still, quieter than I'd ever been. It was almost peaceful. And in that silence, I finally understood the truth he'd been trying to live by. Some things don't end in shouting or tears. They just stop, clean, calm, and final. That's how I lost him. Not to another woman, not to anger, but to the silence I'd mocked for years. The silence that had always been waiting for its turn to speak. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.